So, home value index rose 0.7% in August nationally, the strongest month-of-month gain since May last year. The result pushed the annual change higher for a second month in a row to 4.1. The growth cycle has been gradually building momentum since the February rate cut, with buyer demand spurred by a lift in borrowing capacity, real wages growth, rising confidence, and what is likely to be a growing sense of urgency as advertised stock levels remain tight. Once again, we are seeing a clear mismatch between available supply and demonstrated demand, placing upward pressure on values. The annual trend is estimated home sales is up 2% on last year and tracking almost 4% above the previous 4 years. Wow. At this same time, advertised levels remain about negative 20% below average, and this time last year. So 20% down on advertised stock. Vendors are in a strong position being a seller's market. Auction clearance rates rose 70% in August. We started to see the usual start of spring upswing in new listings coming to the market. A pick up in the flow of stock coming to the market through spring will be good news for buyers, giving them a bit more choice. Just so that you know, I've been in the business for here in Australia for nearly 25 years, and August, September is always the lowest stock levels of the year. Regardless of the market, those are when the stock levels are at their lowest for obvious reasons. One being we've just come through a winter, and this particular winter was a wet winter, which we don't typically see in Perth. So there is still a bit of recovery from the wet weather, which we are not always used to. So that's why it's probably a little lower than usual, as well as those tailwinds, which we know are about at the moment. While housing values are rising across most regions, the pace of growth remains modest. We know that there can't be massive growth. There's just too much unaffordability there. We will see some growth, but it's going to be moderate. Index peaked at 3.1% in March 2021, and the upswing commenced in early 2023, climbing quite rapidly, reaching 1.3 high in May 2023. I'd be surprised if we saw the monthly rate of change in the national HVI getting anywhere near these earlier cyclical peaks because of those facts that I mentioned. Growth trend remains geographically broad-based, with almost every region recording rises. Mid-sized capitals are still leading the way, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide following closely behind. Let's have a look at closer Sydney growth, 0.8 for the month, 1.7 for the quarter, 2.1 for the year. Melbourne, 0.3 for the month, 1% for the quarter, 1.4 annually. Brizzy, 1.23 and 7.9. Adelaide, 0.9, 2.1, 6.5 for the year. Perth, 1.1. So we've had the strongest gain in August. So we had the strongest monthly gain, 1.1%. And we've also had the second strongest quarter next to Darwin. So 3.1 as opposed to 5% in Darwin. We've had a quarterly growth. Annual is still only 6.6 in the last 12 months, and Darwin's 10.2. Everyone lower than that. So combined capitals 0.8, 1.9, 3.6 annually. Regional combined 0.5, 1.66%. Nationally, we've got a 0.7 rise for the month, 1.8 for the quarter, and 4.1 annually. So although it is a buoyant market, it is far from the type of boom that we had post-COVID, and even in Perth last year. Um, be mindful of that, folks. Be mindful of that. I'll talk about that a bit later. Let's have a look at the rental market. National rental growth picked up 0.5% in August, the largest month-on-month rise since May. The re-acceleration in the rental growth has been apparent through most of 2025, with the annual change now rising over 2 consecutive months, reaching 4.1 in August. Rental markets remain extremely tight across most regions, with the national vacancy rate at 1.5 in August. The 5 years prior to 2022 vacancy rate was 3.3. So it's definitely performing well. Let's have a look at Oturua, because we do have some members who tap into our Google Drive and watch this. Oturua down again, 0.2% in August, the 5th monthly fall in a row. I want you guys to take notice of this. And that's why we look at New Zealand, because we know that they had the biggest growth of all in Australasia, and they have struggled now for 2 years. National values, the nationwide median house now stands at 809, but it's still 17.2% above what it was pre-COVID. But it was at one stage 39% above pre-COVID. So go figure. That's the volatility of the market. Auckland negative 0.5, quarter negative 1.8, annually negative 0.1, Wellington negative 0.1, quarter negative and negative, New Zealand negative. Yep, just shows, eh?